Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. I'm on the Federal Highway, just leaving Canberra at the moment and heading back to Sydney. I ducked down for the day just to pop in to the Ancient Greek Artifacts exhibition at the National Museum of Australia, and there's a number of artifacts there that have been loaned from the British Museum, and it was really interesting to see, and they did a great job, I must admit. Very impressed indeed. So I spent about an hour there, and now back in the car and back on the freeway heading back to Sydney, and I thought it'd probably be a good opportunity to knock off another book summary. Click over the counter. I think I'm up to 1,325, and today's book summary is entitled High Conflict by Amanda Ripley, and it's a book which deals with conflict and how to manage conflict in a way which is productive and that serves you, as opposed to a destructive form of conflict which just ends up in pain, suffering and tears. So I look forward to going through this book and seeing what we can learn, what we can appropriate and add to our OBE, other people's experiences, and to our inventory of skills and life hacks. Because conflict is one of those things that causes a lot of grief to a lot of people. It impacts families, it impacts work environments, it impacts communities, and it impacts us all at the individual level as well, because we could have internal conflict which plays over and over again and doesn't allow us peace and tranquility. So this book is an opportunity just to identify and define what high conflict is, and to learn some skills, some tricks of the trade that may be able to help us become better at dealing with conflict. I guess we've all probably been through conflict in our lives, through high conflict, and the author describes it quite well when he says that high conflict can start small, but before you know it, it becomes an all-consuming us versus them feud that takes on and morphs into a life of its own, and it just gets worse and worse if you don't manage it well. But interestingly, the author intelligently and discerningly breaks conflict into two types of conflict, and reminds us that there is a big difference between healthy conflict, where curiosity exists, and high conflict, which ends nowhere good, because it's hard to be curious when you're outraged and your brain has flicked into reptilian mode of fight, flight, or freeze, where you can't think logically, you can't think rationally, and emotion overtakes you. And the more you get involved, the more you engage, the worse it seems to get, because you can't think straight, you can't think rationally, and you can't be productive in any way, shape or form, and you just become an enemy to yourself, and you become reactive as opposed to responsive. So there's a big difference between being reactive and being responsive. Reactive is more instinctive, and as we said, it's more animalistic, it's more primitive in terms of its ability to respond or react or act on the stimuli that are being pumped and directed towards you and potentially misinterpreted by you. But the difference between reaction and response is that response is more calm. Response is more mature because there's a gap between stimulus and action, and that gap allows for thinking, to be able to think in terms of what you're going to do, how you're going to respond, rather than doing it without any thought process whatsoever. So by thinking, you're able to understand in a measured way what has happened, and to consider the first, second and third level consequences, and determine what is the best response, what is the best way of dealing with it that's going to give you your best future outcome. So the author goes on to say that it's important not to be convinced of your own righteousness and make negative assumptions of those who take a different position to you. It's really easy to say, well, look, I am wrong, I am right and you are wrong, and to take the high moral ground. But there are different perspectives in our lives. Everybody is entitled to a different perspective, and based on their experience and based on the information that they have available to them, because we've all got slithers of reality. We've all got slithers of reality that's available to us. But some people may have more slithers and have more pieces of the puzzle available to them to consider, to contemplate, and to come up with the best solution or the best response. So just because you've seen 3 pieces of the puzzle and it looks like X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean that the other person who has 10 pieces of the puzzle gives them a better or a worse view of the situation and the reality at hand. And it's important not to seek total victory, because the author says here that those who seek total victory usually end up in a situation where there are 2 losers. There sometimes needs to be a measured middle ground that is taken, where both are right, where both get to win. You may not get a total victory, but 2 people achieving 95% of what they're looking for is probably better than one person getting 100% and the other person getting 0, because it's a skewed outcome, and you're going to have one person who's very happy and you're going to have one person who potentially could be very, very unhappy, and that unhappiness gets carried forward for the rest of their lives, where they will sabotage you at every opportunity. So sometimes it's better to give up a small amount in order to gain a relationship and to benefit long term. The key message that comes from this book summary and this story is that there's always an understory. There's always more to the story than what we tend to know or what we tend to see. And we need to be able to, I guess, dig a little bit deeper, scratch the surface and understand what the understory is to help us be better off and to know what caused the escalation, what caused the overreaction, and what caused the problem. Because, as we said, there are two sides to every coin. There's the heads, there's the tails, the top side, the bottom side, but there's also the edge, which goes 360 degrees around the coin, which gives us even more perspectives and different angles to be able to see things at, where we don't see the other person's perspective, we don't see the either perspective, but we see our own perspective and our own experience. So always be aware, according to this author, that when people get emotional, when people get worked up, that there's something more that we need to seek and to understand, because thereby is an understory that, by being curious and by asking the right questions, you may be able to reveal and to lead you to a far greater outcome, a far greater benefit. It's often hard, according to this author, to pinpoint to the untrained eye and ear and to find out what the understory is. But in order to mediate and to find a position of benefit for both, we need to invest some time and learn a little bit more in terms of what the understory is. And in order to identify, to view, and to appreciate the understory, the author here says it's important, and the key is to stay calm so that we minimize the cortisol being flowing, the cortisol being injected into our bloodstream, and to be able to breathe calmly, to manage our heart rate, to stay calm. The most important thing is to stay calm, to breathe it out, and to maintain a balance. Because by staying calm, by breathing it out, by minimizing the cortisol being pumped into your bloodstream, will enable you and allow you to be as rational and as curious as possible, to help you loop and find the right outcome. So the term looping is introduced into this book, and looping is a technique, according to this author, that allows us to paraphrase back to the other person what they're saying, so that they feel that they're being heard. There is nothing more soothing to a person who is in a discussion that potentially could escalate than to hear the other person paraphrasing and looping over and over again, so that you feel that you're being heard, and it demonstrates that you're paying attention to them, and you're at least respecting them. I'll just take a small break now and just let you know that in front of us, that wide expanse of water is a very, very topped up, full Lake George. And as far as the eye can see, Lake George is at its finest. It is just overflowing with water. There are times that you can come here and it will be just a dry lake with nothing, no water, hardly any water. You can see, where I'm seeing water now, as far as the eye can see. There are other times that I've been here, and all I can see is just dust and grass and drought. But today I have been fortunate to have come down here to Canberra and to have been presented with a glorious, an abundant, a flooded Lake George, and it is quite beautiful. So let's get back to our discussion where we talk about the art of looping and paraphrasing, because what it does is it demonstrates that we're listening, and it demonstrates that we've heard what the other person is saying, and strategically it slows down the conversation and reduces the emotion, and it reduces the heart rate, reduces the breathing, and it allows for the cortisol to dissipate. Because what we've learnt in science is that when somebody's cranky, when somebody is worked up, when somebody has had cortisol pumped into their body, cortisol is adrenaline. It takes about half an hour for that person to relax and for that cortisol to dissipate and leave their body, and to allow them to be able to become more rational in their thought processes and more balanced in their view. So by slowing down the conversation, by looping, by paraphrasing, you're helping the other person become more productive. You're helping the other person become more positioned to be able to see another perspective. So the author reminds us here not to become a victim of high conflict, where we get caught up in the vortex, which is quite negative and quite demanding. And to understand that we are surrounded by some people who absolutely love high conflict, love being in the vortex, and they thrive on conflict. And they're often referred to as being conflict entrepreneurs, people who generate conflict to be able to make the most of the situation, to be able to leverage the weakness that it creates in other people. Because some people just freeze when you push them into high conflict, whereas, as I said, other people thrive in an environment of high conflict. Now you've got to understand that there are people who are fire starters, who dial up the heat in certain situations, and they do it on purpose. They do it strategically. I had an uncle of mine or a couple of uncles of mine who have passed away, who whenever they'd do something and they knew that they were in the wrong, what they would do is they would create a diversion by causing a fight with somebody for no reason at all. Causing a fight with somebody in order to get up and leave and to escape a particular situation before people actually found out what they were up to, that they would use it to their benefit. And it works for the first time, the second time, but sooner or later you cotton onto them, and my auntie cottoned on to my uncle, and and he said that she knew that he would cause a fight with an innocent bystander just to be able to get up and leave and use that as an excuse to escape and to get out of the firing line of questions that would reveal the situation that he had created. The author here then goes on to say that when you're in conflict, you should try and invest as much time as possible, first and foremost, in identifying what you both have in common and documenting it and agreeing that there is A, B and C that you have in common. So establishing a common ground is an important way to lead you to conflict resolution. And the way you get to that conflict resolution, or the way you get to a position of commonality, is by being curious, by asking proper questions, by asking open-ended questions which help you define and identify what you have in conflict, what you have in common, and by building a common ground, then and you can start identifying and looking at the things that you don't have in common, and you can take a break and decide to come back and just to discuss it when you're more relaxed and you're more chilled, or you may have a meal where you can break bread together and to build rapport. So once we've used our curiosity and identified what we've got in common, we need to loop over and over again and to summarize and repeat and to interrupt each other as best we can when we're not productive in what we're saying and we're heading to escalation. Try and bring that situation down and to reduce the heat through asking questions, staying calm, and reminding the other person of the things that you have in common and the fact that you have a common ground or a common base, and your intentions are positive and productive. You're not trying to damage each other, you're trying to benefit each other and come to a productive solution where you both achieve 90% of your outcome or 95%. Focus on the positives, focus on the gains, rather than focus on the things you're going to miss out on. So thank you very much once again for spending some time to go through a book summary and joining me on this vicarious journey along the Federal Highway, where I'm heading back to Sydney, where I'm trying to make the most of this downtime. Whilst I'm driving, we can also have a bit of a chit chat and cover another book summary and learn something new and hopefully incorporate it into our skill set, so that we've got more things that we can use and leverage to help us solve conflict by being more curious and to learn the technique of looping, where we paraphrase and slow the conversation down so that we can come to an outcome where both can benefit, rather than having one person be the outright winner and the other one being the outright loser. Try and achieve a win-win situation where we both win more than what we lose. So thank you very much, and I really enjoyed, as I said before, going to the artifacts, the ancient Greek artifact exhibition at the National Museum in Canberra, and seeing a number of artifacts that have come out of the British Museum, things that I'd probably never get a chance to see in my life because I've never been to England, but to see them here in Australia is a wonderful opportunity and an experience. What I did notice was that there was a number of beautiful artifacts, and the colour on the pottery and the beauty in the sculptures, and just the way they exhibited it and they showed it off was really interesting and well worth the trip to Canberra, because it just goes to show time and time again that there's never been a time in the history of Greece where the Greeks were not deeply religious, where the gods, God didn't have a significant and magnificent influence on every aspect of Greek life, from the arts, theatre, literature, sculpture, music, poetry, you name it. Everything that came out of Greece during those golden years, and even in modern times since the days of Christianity, everything has coloured, shaped, morphed, and positively coloured the way Greeks live and the things that Greeks have been able to pass on through democracy, through the arts, through all of the things that have led to free thinking. I just shake my head and I just say how wonderful it is. And the history of Greece, the history of democracy and free thought, and all of those things are the greatest export that Greece has been able to give the world, the eyes to see, the voice to speak, and the ears to hear, to be infused in all of civilized culture that we have throughout the world, to give us a foundation, a clean slate, the building blocks to build a bigger and better future for everyone, regardless of where they live. Because Greece is not a mere geography. Greece, Hellenism, is a way of thought, is a freedom of speech, is a brilliance of expression. It's more than just any one particular thing. And as we said before, it's infused. Every culture, or every civilized culture throughout the world, and you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, every single place you look. And it makes me very, very proud to have a Greek heritage. But even if I didn't have a Greek heritage, even if my parents weren't born in Greece, I know that everybody would feel and know that they all are all an extension of Greek culture and the things that the Greeks were able to take, live, and pass on link in this long chain of democracy and freedom of thought and free expression that we need to be able to embrace with our 10 fingers, our 2 hands, and hug closely to us with our 2 arms, and to pass on to future generations. We are just a link, but an important link. We are a voice, an important voice. We are ears and eyes that we need to be able to freely pass on and nurture to the future generations through our example and through our knowledge, learning and expression of our lives. Thank you very much once again. Take care, and I look forward to coming to you from a different place with a different message of empowerment, where we can live, learn and pass it on, and add to this wonderful library of Jim's 5am Club, so that future generations can benefit and leverage as best they can. Yassas, take care from Canberra, and I'll come to you again at some point in the near future. Yassas, and bye for now.